They called him a loser, the kind of person everyone overlooked, the one who always seemed to be one step behind. For years he struggled, ignored by his peers, and dismissed by those who thought they had it all figured out. The people in the office, the ones who always seemed to be a few steps ahead in life, ridiculed him. They believed they were untouchable, successful, and far beyond anyone like him. But they didn't know what he was truly capable of. At first, it seemed like he would always remain in the shadows. Day after day, the whispers grew louder, mocking his every attempt to break free from his mediocre life. It felt like the world was closing in on him. But deep down, something inside him refused to quit. He wasn't about to let their opinions define his future. No one expected him to rise, but that's exactly what he did. One decision changed everything. He walked into a room where the people who had once looked down on him gathered, and did something no one saw coming. He didn't just prove them wrong. He turned the tables in a way that left everyone stunned. How? By hiring their boss, the very person they all admired, the one they thought was the pinnacle of success. What happened next? Well, that's where the story takes a shocking twist. Stay tuned to find out how this loser turned the tables and became the one they'd never see coming. The game was just beginning. To understand how it all happened, you need to know a bit more about him. His name was Ryan, a quiet guy who kept mostly to himself. He wasn't what you'd call a natural-born leader. In fact, most people barely noticed him when he walked into a room. He had the kind of job that nobody thought was important: filing papers, answering calls, running errands. It seemed like the kind of position that went unnoticed, even though it was crucial to keeping the whole office running smoothly. Ryan had always been the kind of person who did his work quietly and never caused a scene. He didn't have the flashy personality that commanded attention, nor did he try to fit in with the more ambitious colleagues who were always striving for the top. But deep inside, he had something that the others didn't: an unwavering belief that he could do more. It was a belief so strong that, even when he faced rejection and judgment from those around him, he never let go of it. While everyone else was busy chasing promotions and climbing the corporate ladder, Ryan quietly observed. He took mental notes of what worked and what didn't. He saw how the people at the top were far from perfect. They had their flaws, their insecurities, and their own struggles. But what really stood out to him was how they handled failure. They didn't let it stop them. They found ways to bounce back. That was the key. Ryan realized he needed to think differently, to break away from the traditional path that everyone around him was following. Little did anyone know, Ryan had been secretly planning his next move for months. They all thought he was content with his position, that he was just another cog in the machine. But what they didn't see was the quiet determination growing inside him. Soon, they'd be in for a surprise, and it would shake their world. But how far was he willing to go to get what he wanted? And would he succeed, or would the world prove him wrong once again? Ryan's plan wasn't something that could happen overnight. It wasn't about making a grand gesture or simply trying to one-up everyone. No, this was about strategy, patience, and timing. He had to make sure that every move he made was carefully calculated. The people in the office, especially those who had always dismissed him, wouldn't even know what hit them when the time came. But first, Ryan had to figure out how to navigate the maze of office politics that kept everyone stuck in place. There was Sarah, the office manager, who always seemed to think she had it all figured out. She was the one who subtly undermined Ryan's ideas, always positioning herself as the person who knew best. Her cold demeanor and sharp words left him second-guessing himself every time he spoke up. But Ryan knew something others didn't. Sarah was restless. She had ambitions beyond the office, and she wasn't happy just playing the role of manager. Ryan had watched her long enough to see her dissatisfaction, and that would be his leverage. Then there was Derek, the ambitious team leader who constantly competed with everyone, trying to prove he was the next big thing. He always saw Ryan as weak, a guy who wouldn't take risks or stand up for himself. What Derek didn't know was that Ryan had been quietly gathering information, learning everything about Derek's work habits, his weaknesses, and his need for approval. Ryan could see how Derek pushed people away, never trusting anyone, always trying to win at any cost. As the days went on, Ryan began to put his plan into motion. He started speaking up in meetings, offering ideas that seemed simple but had a surprising impact. He began making connections with higher-ups, ones who had always ignored him before. The more he did, the more he started to feel the walls around him closing in. The others were starting to notice the shift, but they couldn't quite figure out what was happening. All they knew was that Ryan, the loser, was suddenly a threat, and they weren't ready for it. The tension in the office was palpable. Ryan could feel the shift, the whispers behind closed doors, the side glances when he entered a room, and the subtle yet growing unease among his colleagues. They didn't know what he was up to, but they knew something was changing. Ryan wasn't just another employee anymore. He was beginning to disrupt the rhythm of the office, and it made them uncomfortable. Sarah, Derek, and the others couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they were starting to feel like they were losing control. Sarah, in particular, had begun to monitor Ryan's every move, watching how he interacted with the senior managers and higher-ups. She knew something was off, but she couldn't see the whole picture. Meanwhile, Derek had grown suspicious. He noticed Ryan's increasing confidence, the way he was now getting the attention of people who had once ignored him. One afternoon, as the pressure mounted, Ryan found himself in an impromptu meeting with the CEO, a moment he'd never imagined. The CEO had been watching his progress from afar, intrigued by the quiet, unassuming worker who was suddenly stirring the pot in the office. But there was no turning back now. Ryan had already committed himself to this course, and everything had led to this moment. In the meeting, Ryan laid out his thoughts, the strategy he had been refining for months, all while keeping his calm. He could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him, Sarah's, Derek's, and even the CEO's. The air was thick with anticipation. They were all wondering, was this just another one of Ryan's fleeting moments of brilliance, or was he about to change everything? And as the CEO leaned forward, the room fell silent, hanging on Ryan's every word. The next decision would either make him or break him, and no one knew which way it would go. Just as Ryan finished his pitch, the CEO's gaze softened, a faint smile crossing his face. But before anyone could say anything, the door swung open, and Sarah stepped in, her expression tight, her body language rigid with tension. The CEO's eyes flicked to her, then back to Ryan, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Sarah wasn't just walking in to add her thoughts. She was here with a purpose, one that Ryan hadn't anticipated. With a barely concealed look of triumph, she placed a thick file on the table and slid it toward the CEO. "I think you should take a look at this," she said, her voice sharp, her eyes fixed on Ryan. Ryan's heart raced. He had no idea what was in that file, but the sudden shift in the atmosphere was like a punch to the gut. Sarah's gaze lingered on him for just a second, as though she knew something he didn't. The CEO opened the file, flipping through it quickly, his brow furrowing. Ryan's palms grew sweaty. Was this it? Was this where everything unraveled? As the CEO scanned the contents, Ryan tried to stay composed, but the weight of the situation was unbearable. The file contained a detailed report, and from the little Ryan could make out, it wasn't good. It was all about him, his past mistakes, moments of doubt, and even rumors that had never been true, but were now being presented as fact. It was an attack on his credibility, a calculated effort to bring him down before he could make his move. Ryan's worst fears were coming to life. Sarah had been playing a much deeper game than he realized. But what shocked him even more was how far she was willing to go. Had she known about his plan all along? Was this personal? The stakes had just risen, and now he had more to lose than ever before. The room fell into an eerie silence as the CEO read through the file. Ryan could feel the tension tightening around him, like a noose slowly closing in. Sarah stood there, her arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a quiet satisfaction. It felt like all the work Ryan had put in, all the quiet planning, was unraveling before his eyes. He was on the verge of losing everything. But just as the CEO closed the file, something unexpected happened. He looked up, his gaze hardening. "Is this the best you've got, Sarah?" he asked, his voice calm but full of authority. Sarah's expression faltered for a brief moment, the smallest crack in her armor. "You're accusing him of things that aren't even relevant to his performance here. You've been playing a dangerous game, and it's about time we put an end to it." Ryan's mind was racing. He didn't understand. Was this the moment he'd been waiting for? Or was it just another twist in this twisted game? But then the CEO turned to Ryan, his eyes softened. "I've been watching you, Ryan, and I have to say, you've impressed me more than I anticipated. You've played this game well, even better than I thought." The room seemed to shift in an instant. Sarah's face drained of color as the CEO continued. "I've already made my decision. You're moving up. I'm offering you a position that Sarah was eyeing for herself." Ryan barely registered the words at first. It was happening. He was getting what he had worked for. But then, as Sarah's face twisted in disbelief, the CEO dropped another bombshell. "And as for you, Sarah, I think it's time we parted ways." The final twist hit hard. As Sarah stormed out, Ryan felt the weight of the moment. His journey was only just beginning. But in a world where nothing was ever as it seemed, the true test had only just started. As Sarah's footsteps echoed down the hall, Ryan stood there, still processing what had just happened. The CEO's words were ringing in his ears, but they didn't quite feel real yet. He'd done it. He had taken the risk, played the game, and come out on top. The quiet, unassuming guy who had once been laughed at, dismissed, and ignored was now standing in a position of power. But even as the shock wore off, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that he had just entered a new world, one where trust was fragile and success came at a cost. He looked around the room, where his colleagues, now in stunned silence, were beginning to process the events that had unfolded. They had all underestimated him, just as they had underestimated Sarah's ambition and ruthlessness. The real lesson here wasn't just about making it to the top. It was about understanding the dynamics of the people around you, knowing when to play the game, and when to change the rules entirely. The next few weeks weren't easy. Ryan had to navigate a new set of challenges, including rebuilding the team that had once turned their backs on him. Derek, still reeling from the shock of his own failure, grudgingly accepted Ryan's leadership, but it wasn't smooth sailing. Trust had to be earned, and every move Ryan made was now under a microscope. But Ryan wasn't worried. He had proven he could rise above the noise. Looking back, he realized the key to his success wasn't just about getting the promotion, or even about hiring the boss. It was about the quiet strength he had built over the years, the resilience that came from enduring failure, and the belief that no matter how far behind you start, there's always a way to turn the tables. The story of Ryan wasn't just a tale of revenge or ambition. It was about growth, strategy, and ultimately, the courage to take control of your own destiny. As the months passed, the office would never be the same, and neither would Ryan. But he had earned it, the respect, the position, and most importantly, the confidence in himself that would carry him forward.